I've got the power. I've got the power in me. I've got the power. I've got the power in me.
Hey, welcome everybody on LinkedIn. Welcome everybody on Facebook. Welcome everybody on YouTube for joining us for our Protec Live Power Hour. We're back in the studio literally this week because we're in our new space right down the road from our old space. We're building our new studio. We have Studio B ready to rock, and we have Tom and our guests in our studio in Studio B. I'm right across the hall, and we are bringing you live this week from Protec at our new location. So welcome everybody. I'm Matt Medinka, head of marketing for Protec. And we have guests from Shermco back with us today. We've had a lot of crazy events happening over the last week or two. And we want to cover some of the processes and things that our companies, our industry go through when these things happen. So Tom, why don't you introduce our guest today?
Thank you, Matt. Well, kind of starting at the far side there, we've got Jeremy Presnal back again this month. If you caught our Power Hour last month, you obviously are familiar with Jeremy and his background. And we were talking about hazardous energy control. So
yep, that's right.
Welcome back. You did such a good job, man. You were,
well,
insistent that we had you back a second time.
Absolutely. And it was great to be here, and just wanted to say the studio looks awesome. So looking forward to it.
A bit better
today.
from last month.
Yeah, this is great.
And, Jeremy did a really good job with us last month. We were all really excited, talking with him. But we did get his better half this time. We've got Clayton Wall joining us. He works in Jeremy's department over at Shermco in the Environmental Health and Safety Group. So two leading subject matter experts in the area of environmental health and safety. So very privileged, very happy to have you gentlemen here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
And particularly, today's topic, recent events, obviously, when Hurricane Ian came in, and particularly what we saw unfold in Florida, it just kind of reminded me of back a few years and everything, but my involvement when Hurricane Harvey came through and hit the western side of the Gulf, and we had oil refinery and petrochemical and a lot of plant devastation and stuff. So it just kind of brought that back to mind. And thinking about the Power Hour, I thought, what a great topic. I happen to know some subject matter experts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually, during one of the past hurricanes, was the safety manager at a major refinery, and were kind of in that hot seat of putting together a lot of what we're going to be talking about in this broadcast.
Yeah, that's right. Gained appreciation for the planning and the response to a natural disaster. I was in petrochemical when Harvey came through, and the facility that I was at went completely cold. So, storm came through, and then the process of restarting it, which was quite extended over a period of time. So we learned a lot as a safety organization, working with our ops partners through that process.
Right. Now, fortunately, silver lining in the Hurricane Ian, really minor to no effect on the oil and gas industry that I am familiar with based on the reports that I've read. One, to the best of my knowledge, there are no refineries in Florida. Predominantly, we find those over on the Texas, Louisiana. That was not in the storm track. So silver lining in that. However, obviously we see the news, we see the utility workers, everybody, going to lend their support and everything to, rebuild a lot of the infrastructure. Also, obviously, this area of Florida is very known for their tourism, a lot of large hotels, convention centers, so forth. We also obviously have the agriculture, we have the citrus production and everything that took a pretty significant hit. And one that probably a lot of people don't think of, but also phosphate mining, which really goes into like the fertilizer manufacturing. And based on some Bloomberg reports, it does look like that area has taken a little bit of a hit. And there may be, again, some plant recoveries and everything that we're seeing there. So obviously your experience comes from the refinery and the petrochemical, but I think the overall strategy of what needs to be done in one of these disasters, whether it's a large data center that went down, a large refinery that went down, or any large facility, I think the talking points that we're going to be going through are kind of universal as what do we need to do. And I know just prior to the start, we're talking a little bit about, what is that sequence? What is the analysis sequence? And, I kind of started off with, well, you obviously have the initial event. Once the event is, to a point where you can now start to respond and react, what is the first and foremost thing that we need to do? And I think you nailed it right on the head.
Yeah, I think in regardless of the industry that you're in, scene size up and control is critical, right?
That's right.
You're going to have a ton of people that want to jump in and try to help with the situation, try to fix the problem. Naturally, we all want to fix the problem. Mm-hmm. And so in the few of these events that I've been involved with, it became very clear and critical to control the area, right? So who's in charge of the area? Whether from a service industry standpoint, that's our people or a host employer, but just connecting those communication channels to make it real clear that there is an order of events. It's based on a plan, right? That plan may change, but it's a documented plan, and we update the plan as we go. And when we deviate from the plan, there has to be a process to do so through mitigation steps and whatnot. So I think just from certainly was true in the petrochemical industry, just the need to control that area was critical. That's step one in the plan, walking back into the facility at that point. And we had partners joining us in that step as well that we had to be mindful of.
Yeah, I was going to just mention, I think that's a great call out as you're talking about, really who the leader is, who's that point of contact in charge of the work, both from the host employer perspective and the contractor or service companies, partners, really, because it is a partnership, right? And I think, those clear lines of communication are so important. And when we think back to, some of the expectations that OSHA has on the host employers and the contractors, you nailed it on the head. Starting there is that foundation to build out that plan and start off on the right foot. But as you also mentioned, everybody wants to help. There's a lot of pressure mounting to get things back to a stable operating condition. And, especially when people are without power or they're without fuel or, everybody's world's just been turned upside down. So there's a lot of human factors there too that can play a role.
And that was something that, during my involvement back during the Harvey, several years ago, that main contact at the plant that we were about to go to work is, you're right. I mean, all these contractors, we assembled this huge workforce and everything. We're in town. We're ready to rock and roll, man. We want to get in those gates. We want to start doing the assessments and, doing the walkthroughs and seeing, getting initial, of what we're up against and everything, because there were still elements of the safety plan that still, which we'll talk about in a moment, that still needed to be addressed. And, until we were able to actually start doing our walkthroughs and kind of getting an idea of what we were dealing with. But I was very impressed with how this particular plant handled it. It was kind of like you were saying, look, we know that you're here to help us. We know that you're excited. We're not letting you in the gate. We have measures that we have to take and secure, and we'll do some of the initial pumping out, cleaning, and so forth, so that when we bring you in, a lot of the initial hazards, have been addressed. And again, now seeing, from the opposite side, I'm picturing you in that role saying, all right, guys, I know you're excited. You want to come here and help, but stay out for the next 2 days. We got things that we've got to put in place before we can allow you in.
Yeah. And I think it becomes very important to manage the perception, right? There's a whole lot of work that goes on that you may not see, to your point, right? The business is busy developing a plan, making sure that things are in order. Right? I mean, basics. You have PPE to go in, right, to execute the task.
Right.
And we can go down the list of the critical elements of a safety plan, but you don't really see that work happening, right? So from a host employer standpoint, they may be wondering what you're doing. Well, they don't see it in front of them, perhaps, but there's a whole lot of work that has to go into that plan to respond to a natural disaster like that.
You know, the safety plan is more complicated than, like, again, you know, we all, you know, come from the service industries, and you know, you come from you know, what I always refer to as more of the host side of it and everything, but we're all used to outages. You know, we're used to scheduled outages. We're used to the steps of bringing an entire plant down and everything to do maintenance and so forth. And again, you know, we've got our hazardous energy control, as we talked about last month.
That's right.
We talked about our standard operating procedures and our protocols, and you know, the PPE. And we always think of, you know, establishing an electrically safe work environment and our lockout, tagouts, test before touch, and grounding. But when we're talking about going in after a, you know, disaster, whether it was flood, you know, tornado, earthquake, whatever, there are other elements that need to be considered and brought forth in the safety plan. I mean,
Absolutely.
there can be, obviously, in flooding situations, obviously potential exposure to chemical and wastewater, and you know, we've got potentially structural damage that we have to also kind of take into consideration. Quality of air.
Yeah.
You know, I remember, you know, in the days talking about doing the live broadcast, you and I started talking about some of the simple things, like in the office buildings and everything that might have been affected. Hey, we see flood damage and everything to the tile, flooring, and so forth. Is there asbestos in that?
Right. Sure.
So, I mean,
Sure.
now beyond just an outage and, you know, bringing the plant down, doing maintenance and so forth, there's a whole host of additional potential hazards that we have to take into consideration.
Yeah.
And again, you know, in our early discussions, I think, you know, talking about the human element of it, and how that affects your overall safety, you're talking to me a little bit about some of the pressures that you were under during that time that, you know, you had to deal with this firsthand.
Yeah, well, there's a supply chain disruption when an event like that happens, right? And not just the industry that I came from, but as we see it in the service industry we're in now, we hear about those data points of events like these that cause supply chain disruptions or challenges, and so that pressure is real. It certainly was in the petrochemical business when, you know, you just watch the news, see the media, right? Gasoline shortages, whether it's real or not. It creates pressure for a facility. And so from a host employer standpoint, we're trying to manage that perception and not put pressure on our contract partners. You know, so we want to make sure people work at the speed of safe. And what's the plan say, right? What have we developed a plan for today? And that became really, really critical, that we have a plan for today, and we'll adjust the plan as needed. We don't deviate from the plan, right, without approval. And that goes back to kind of the starting point of who's in charge, right? So a high level event commander, someone has to be in charge of decision rights. And as we were talking before it started, that may create a bit of a constraint in the process, but I see that as a good constraint, because you're walking into unknowns. So you should have some checks and balances that create safe constraints. And yeah, maybe it slows the process down a bit, but by design it should.
Right.
Sure. And the other thing, you know, when you think about constraints, supply chain disruptions, as well as just now you're trying to get a large number of resources in to support, you know, and it's usually not just one facility, right? It's everybody on Refinery Row, or it's everyone in the coastal area, right? That's working, really trying to probably secure a lot of the same resources. And so think about the human capital piece of trying to get the workforce there, get them ready. You're talking about the safety plan, but you know, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes with the host employer trying to get things to a you know, ready for work standpoint, but also on the services side, there's probably a lot of training that needs to happen, right? A lot of additional orientations
Yes.
that's going to go into it. You're probably extending your workforce family with some new individuals or bringing
Exactly.
people from different regions.
Contractors coming in, working under your banner. And, this brings back a lot of memories because back in Harvey, my role on the one restoration was I was the quality manager and trainer on site. And I remember one of the elements, when we were reviewing with the new faces, the new boots that we were bringing in that we had not worked with in the past and everything, as part of the onboarding, I would meet with them. We would review what our overall safety plan was, what our quality control plan was going to be. But one of the things I also really stressed again was understand that our client is under a tremendous amount of pressure.
That's right.
They're losing, I forget what the ridiculous sum of money was per day, but they were just losing a tremendous amount of money per day. As you can imagine, a petrochemical plant, taking an outage of this nature. So I said, one of the things that I'm going to really stress is we've got to hold to our plans. We've got to manage our clients' expectations, but we have to be empathetic. We have to utilize diplomacy. Tensions are going to get high. Tempers are going to flare. And particularly in the early stages, our plan really took into place a lot of second in, I'd say, priority to the safety plan. Safety
Sure.
plan is number one, but second in priority, I would say, in these events is documentation. Oh, by the way, did I say documentation?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we're always reliant upon, in any type of normal outage or maintenance outage, is access to single line diagrams. Again,
Sure.
go back to our energy control
That's
conversation
exactly right.
last month.
That's exactly right.
Where are the energy sources? Well, now we're potentially hooking up temporary power generators and so forth.
That's
because we
right.
need to establish communications. We need to get pumps going possibly. We need
Right.
temporary power on the plant. Well, where are those drawings?
Right.
In a flood situation, they might have gone underwater.
Right.
The hard drives might have got flooded. So now we're so reliant on getting that relationship going with our host, because we're really depending upon some of the experience and memory of the staff there as we're doing our walkthroughs, because now we've got to trace things out and try to replicate
Right.
what those drawings would have provided to us. So managing that expectation and everything at the front end, and it's like, look, we're not just going to come crashing through the gates and start tearing things apart.
Right.
There is a process. First part of the safety plan is we can't hook up generators and get temporary power going without knowing where and how, having a proper schedule, communicating at the start of every day what will be powered, what will not be powered, so that all the different workers on that site is communicated well throughout, which I'm sure you went through a lot of that during your time with the plan.
Hey, Tom, and one thing and again, just to kind of refer back a little bit to our discussion on hazardous energy control, but you were talking about the availability of drawings and really having the information up front. If you're fortunate enough to have those, we still have to factor in the condition of the equipment, right? And our grounds and how things have been isolated, and now factor in the flooding and that type of stuff. And you mentioned, we're bringing in temporary power generators. Now we are introducing energy that has to be controlled. We have to know where it's going to go. And to Clayton's point around that safety plan, I think as far as just the overall readiness for the project, it's still one of the most critical elements. And I know you got a lot of experience with building hazardous energy control plans, but you had the luxury with these turnarounds to sometimes have weeks or months to build plans, right?
Yeah.
In this scenario, you don't have that same luxury.
Yeah.
I think so. Another aspect of managing a project like that that's so critical is, whether your company calls them life critical safety areas or cardinal rules or whatever it is, those are the things that still don't change.
Right.
So we're talking about hazardous energy control, responding to an event. We're going to go in and we're going to isolate equipment and we're going to perform maintenance on it. Whatever it is, electrical process, right? Go down the list. The steps of hazardous energy control don't change, right? So you have to fight the urge to recognize that, because a lot of other things around you are changing, right? Standard operating procedures might have to be modified because you just crashed a process in a disaster mode. Now you're trying to clean it, shut it down, right? Decommission it, get it safe for maintenance, and going to go the other way with it at some point. And there may be some deviations in that aspect, but the cardinal rules or life critical safety areas, if you will, don't change.
That's
so,
right.
Exactly.
So just managing that while people are watching and seeing, hey, we're deviating from an operating procedure, perhaps. That doesn't mean we get to deviate from a hazardous energy control plan.
That's right.
Exactly. And that again is one of the areas of discipline. On these job sites of this nature and everything is, a lot of times the temptation to deviate is you want to do a good job. You want to show your value, get things up and going faster and so forth. And again, sometimes it takes discipline to curb your enthusiasm, take a step back and say, wait a minute, is that the safe way to do it?
That's right.
Let's go back to the fundamentals. We can't forget the fundamentals here. And it can be very overwhelming because, again, I remember long hours, 7 days a week. I think we were doing like 12 on, 1 off. And we were averaging about 14-hour days. And these were stressful days because, you're constantly in areas of flux where possibly there's supply chain issues where we were expecting material to come in today. We had crews all ready to start moving on this part of the plant. Well, for whatever reason, we didn't get the goods in that day. So now we've got to mobilize and shift, because we just can't have, 75 people standing around, where else could we utilize them? So now, literally on the fly, we've got to come up with a new plan, orient people to, okay, we're going to move you from this job assignment. We're going to move you over to this one now. So there were times where literally because of the dynamics and things that might change over the course of the day, I remember we did a morning safety briefing. We did a lunchtime safety briefing. And there was times where literally at close of day, we did safety briefings and then discussions about what we think we're going to be doing tomorrow morning.
Right.
And then the morning meeting to confirm if we're doing them or if it's, but communications, I think, is probably, again, would we all agree that's like one of the cornerstones of success is between host, contractor, or contractors, because sometimes, there's a lot of coordination. I know just movement around the plants sometimes, because again, we had our crews trying to go from point A to point B, but there were sections and corridors that were being closed down because, again, you've got construction crews rebuilding structural damages. You've got delivery people trying to maneuver. And, the plant did a really good job where they limited all vehicles to only necessity vehicles. Which meant I did a lot of walking and I was much trimmer as a result of it. But again, these subtle little things that you don't necessarily think about in a standard outage, the dynamics that's going on in some of these larger facilities.
Hey, Tom.
I don't think you can overstate them.
I just wanted to hop in here too, talking about optics and perception. And one of the things that these companies are dealing with, you go back to Snowmageddon, right? Like you had ERCOT and Encore and everybody in Texas also dealing with public perception, right? So you've just had this major disaster. You go back to Harvey and you have a very slow moving 5-mile-an-hour hurricane dumping millions of gallons of water into a bayou that literally sits at sea level. And the public is, we're so 90-second gratification now. Hey, I want my electricity on now. Hey, I want to be able to access that road now and get back to work. And hey, and when literally you're sitting in feet of water for a month, that electricity is not back on for a month. But hey, Governor DeSantis said there's 30,000 linemen waiting to get our power back on. What's going on? So you have the public utilities are handling damage control with the public, right? And then they're looking backwards going, okay, what's going on, guys? Right. They're having to manage it from both directions. They're having to manage public expectation, customer expectation, while working with you guys to coordinate everything. So,
Good point.
it's from somebody who's not privy to what's going on behind the scenes. We're like, now, where's my electricity? So
Yeah, and I would add, for them,
the
the event started well before we showed up, right? I mean, they had been involved in
very good point.
From an emergency response standpoint, from well before the storm hitting, right? They were already in an event command mode.
That's another interesting point, because one of the more comical things on my memory of Harvey and everything, I remember working with my boss, and he did an amazing job. Well, the whole team did an amazing job of getting secured all of these electricians and workers in record time. I mean, we had like deployment of like 300 electricians. And, my boss, he was phenomenal with putting this together, very broad thinker and everything. And I remember him making one of the comments about, we've got all these people. They are mobile right now. We expect them landing in town on this date. And I remember one of my other coworkers saying, where are we going to put them up and how are we going to feed them? And I remember my boss going, figure it out. I got them. But some of those subtle details that this all goes into your overall plan and your execution, because again, you got to make sure that they're housed, their needs are being taken care of, because again, they're going to be working long hours on these job sites and so forth.
Absolutely.
Is the local economy up to support it? Because trying to find the hotels and accommodations were difficult at that point. You've got the dynamics happening at the facility. You've got the dynamics happening all around you in the town. And good point, Matt, the public perception and the public's ability to support you while you're there is also, things that need to be kind of factored and considered. One of the items I do want to step back on, though, a little bit is, we talked about the importance of, in lack of not having the proper documentation and drawings and everything, we can't let hazardous energy slip in any way. We can't.
Right.
That has to maintain high priority. But aside from just the dangers of hooking up a generator wrong or not accounting for backfeed areas or something along those lines, I mean, we all know, working with a generator, you have the potential shock or electrocution, possibly, in the worst case scenario, arc flash burns and so forth. But, there are other aspects, again, depending upon where we have to put this power in. I mean, we might have carbon monoxide issues. So I remember back, during the one that I was assigned to, we made sure that there was at least one crew member in every crew that, kept a gas monitor on. And if we did see that, the levels were getting to unacceptable, that we would vacate, make sure we got proper ventilation and everything in there. Because again, it was it's still a form of energy control, the gases. But how does it also complicate matters in your world of the petrochemical when, staging and hooking up all these generators? That's got to present some additional problems to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, in an industrial facility, it doesn't necessarily have to be just petrochemical, but an industrial facility with flammable gases, right? You always got to worry about where you are now setting generators and really anything that's an ignition source. But generators and light plants become the most common ignition source that you'll find, at least that we found after an event like that. So placement of them, is it hot work applicable? Right? Those kind of questions have to be asked.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to just mention also, and I've seen this in demo type operations, refurbishments. Certainly, I think it also applies in disaster recovery. When you've got crews in there and they're starting to disassemble equipment. You start cutting into lines, whether it's conduit, whether it's a gas line, instrumentation, right?
Right.
I know you've been involved in some safe work practices, Clayton, and you've seen things that work to really help reduce the risk of cutting into the wrong line, right? Because that certainly can introduce a bad day very quickly. We talked about visual aids and the importance of that on the last webinar a little bit with hazardous energy control and electrical safety. You want to share a little bit just kind of what you've seen work with line cuts or line breaks, those things?
Yeah, so it goes back to the point on communication. It was a lesson that we learned. We were doing some demo work, and we had in our plan said we will only cut lines that are marked with fluorescent orange, and so that was our method. We're gonna mark anything that's going to be cut, and will be marked with fluorescent orange, and it will be identified on the permitting process and through the AHA and hands-on. We're gonna put our hands on anything we cut, right? Conductors, pipes, doesn't matter. Permit writer to crew lead. Well, we ended up cutting into a live line,
still with all that effort, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
think about it, all that hard work to avoid.
Right.
Yeah.
You
So
still had an event.
So what we learned was there was a engineering crew that had been in the area several weeks before the event had happened, and they were marking lines with orange fluorescent paint. So they were doing some work an assessment that was going on, and so the line was marked. It was painted fluorescent orange.
So they're actually following.
So we're following
the protocol.
right? I
and
mean,
the
they put their
plan.
hands on it, and we still cut into a live line. So we had to get more creative with live line tags.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to zip tie a tag onto this point, or we're going to tape it if it's a structure. We're going to sign and date, right? Which maybe sounds trivial, but that was the method that we had to go to make sure before we cut or open a line, right, that we've got a visual indicator on it of it's de-energized and it's safe to cut. From an energy control standpoint, we would put tags on locations where they were tested. So if it was live, dead, live, there would be a tag there, and it's signed by the authorized employee and the permit writer.
Right.
Just because there's so much activity going on, and a lot of people in the area trying to rebuild a unit and get it started. And so that was a lesson learned, right? You can be that detailed in communication.
And can still
orange paint on the pipe, put your hands on it, did all that, and still cut into the live line.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You had mentioned about tags, and it just again sparked another memory that I know one of the other areas of just trying to control work efforts, everything. As we would finish certain areas, we would go ahead and do the final inspections, and there would typically be 2, 3, sometimes 4 deep set of eyes that all concur that everything's done. Panels are going back up. Now, one of the things that we had done is once the panels went on, we put typically like your calibration seals. We literally put a label across with the date that the panel went on and the signatures of the inspectors.
Yeah.
And that was kind of done intentionally because at any given time now, we just during our plant walks and everything, we can keep inventory of what is done. But it also is a reminder to the other workers on the job site, don't open those panels.
Yeah.
They're inspected. We know they're good. Now if we went, as we're, initiating and re-energizing, we would do a check to make sure that all the panels, all the labels were secured. But there were a couple where we did see breaches in the labels and everything. So we knew that after the time of inspection, somebody had gotten in there. So that again was a good flag to us that says, okay, we can't energize yet. We got to re-inspect. Why were they in there? Had anything changed? Let's again do the due diligence of going through and checking to make sure that everything has been removed, everything is intact, all the torques are proper and so forth. But that memory just came to me when you mentioned the word tags. It was like, oh yeah. Tagging was what is involved in today's work, what's not involved in today's work, what has been done, what is yet to be done, tracking of materials and a lot of the stuff. I mean, we'd make an assessment. Can it be repaired right here on the job site, or does it have to go out to be repaired, or do we have to replace it altogether?
Yeah.
So tracking tags just to maintain your inventories and where everything is at any stage along the process. That was a huge task.
Those are all great steps that should be implemented kind of day in, day out as well, right? From a visual management standpoint, certainly critical in disaster response mode. In my 15 years in a career, I've seen a handful of events that required or resulted in serious injuries, and all, I'll say it's 3, not like a whole bunch, but serious events could have been prevented with some visual indication, right? Look-alike equipment. This is electrical.
I was just thinking about look-alike equipment.
It's electrical that I'm referring to. So in my career, the 3 serious incidents that I've seen have all been electrical related, and I worked in petrochem. Right? So the process wasn't what was hurting people; it was around electrical safety, and so those events, I firmly believe, would have been prevented with those visual indicators that you're referring to. And in a disaster response mode, right, why would we deviate from that would be the question, right?
I mean, if anything, in the disaster recovery mode, the importance of it even becomes heightened.
Yes.
Because and that was one of the things that, again, the plant that I was assigned to, you had your crews. But even your crews that were there, I mean, you're all wearing common logos and uniform and everything. But I mean, I'm seeing people I've never worked with before because they're, literally they're contract electricians that are coming in working on behalf of, those worked for Shermco at the time. But then beyond that, you had a multitude of other crews that were on the same common facility and everything, construction people, delivery people, et cetera, et cetera. Not everybody was involved in the electrical restoration. So when we did our safety meetings and we were talking about, this sector of the plant is going to go on temporary energy starting at 3:00 tomorrow afternoon. Okay, that's good for all of us. We know what's going on. We know how to mobilize. But now part of the safety plan was how do we communicate it that day, because there's going to be other people potentially moving around those areas of the plant. And here's where, again, the host did a really wonderful job, where they would literally utilize their people, put traffic control, block off corridors, and really did a great job red taping and closing out the sector so that delivery truck could not make a wrong turn and go down the wrong corridor, or other workers of unrelated tasks or whatever could have gotten into those areas. But again, part of it was, if you're working in these areas, we are aware of it. We know that, we're energizing at this point, but maintain your awareness of others in the area. And if you see people that are walking around the area, don't be afraid to just say, excuse me, what is your purpose here? Not trying to get in your face or anything, but we have an energized situation. And one thing that I was really impressed with was the attitudes of the people. At first, we had a couple, that were kind of fearful of, like, hey, you stop, what's your purpose being here? Thinking that, you're thinking I'm going to jump in your face or anything. But what I did find was that, the other contractors and everything on the job site were also equally professional. And they're like, oh, thank you for asking me. I'm here for this particular, and yes, I am aware that, we have energy, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, fantastic. Hey, just looking out for you. Thank you. I appreciate you looking out for me.
That's important, especially
so
multi-employer work sites can, always possess a whole host of
it can go the opposite direction, or it can
have that culture of care attitude really demonstrated by everybody involved. And again, I think the host employer sets the tone, right, with that at their site. But although I say that, I feel like, everybody on that work site has the ability to influence it, in the right way or in the wrong way. But, the other piece I was thinking about, some complications of the work sites related to emergency action plan or emergency response, right? Those are some things that, whether it's disaster recovery or, a refurbishment type demo project, ensuring everybody knows what to do when, some type of emergency event happens.
Right.
That's tough enough in a normal outage setting or on the construction side of things. But again, this is disaster recovery. We've got to think about some additional challenges, such as, our path to the muster zones and our lines of communication. And
Exactly.
the things that Clayton was talking about earlier with, the meetings and the essentially just, what has changed and what folks should expect the next day. I don't know if you have any thoughts or experiences to share in that arena.
I would add, and just so being in the business that I get to work in now, traveling around a lot to various sites, I think in general, I see that host employers do put a lot of effort into making sure that communication happens, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Then it becomes incumbent upon us to make sure that the message gets cascaded out.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
the three meetings that you referred to during the Harvey event that you were involved in, right? You could have easily just had those 3 meetings and went on about your way, right? But that wouldn't have done justice to the team. So that, hey, let's going to go have a conversation about what area is going from greenfield to brownfield,
Right.
or we're going to be energizing particular areas. And so here's that communication plan all the way down to this road's going to be closed.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was, I'd say the particular plant that I was working at, and not just the Shermco, but the other contractors that were there, it really was a wonderful safety culture environment. And again, I will compliment to our hosts. They really set the tone. They were fantastic in the communication with us. They welcomed our feedback and so forth. Because I remember during some of the lockout tagouts and stuff like that, they welcomed us. Please come, be a second set of eyes on these prints and everything. Concur that we do have it all right and everything. And there were a couple times where we found mistakes made.
Sure. Right.
And they were just like, thank you.
Yeah.
This just, again, there was no egos or anything. It was like, thank you. That was a demonstration where we're all tired. We're all, and we all want to go home this evening. So thank you for being that second set of eyes. Thank you for catching that mistake. And we were very fortunate. We got through 5-6 months without any real incidents. But it was interesting. You're talking about first aid and so forth. And, you think of, the first responders and, big event. But in these disaster situations, particularly like in floods and so forth, we really stressed a lot to the workers. Don't take minor injuries for granted.
Right.
I fell. I broke the skin on my knee. I just keep on working. No, there's contamination all over the place. That little cut could easily turn into a major infection because, again, you've got, I hate to say, but in the case of, floods and flood water, how many porta-johns were at that facility that got turned over and washed into the equipment that year? So you got all
sorts of
biohazards, animal debris. And so even simple things like what might have been a minor cut.
Right.
And that we really stress this a lot to the workers and everything. Do not take any of this for granted. Go see the first aid tent, have them, take the appropriate actions and so forth. But again, it's, don't take anything for granted. I guess was the, kind of the big message we were trying to get across to all of our workers.
It's a great point. Another thing I was thinking about along the lines of fatigue management in the petrochem world, most organizations are following API's recommendations around work hours and so many days straight. And, I don't know that the rest of general industry has adopted, maybe the same thinking. I'd like to hope that they are taking that approach. But the other piece is around heat stress, right? And humidity. You're working many days in a row, long hours. You may not have the same climate controls that you did, right? There's no power. I think those are probably some really important factors.
You may
know,
be
when you
wearing
think about
additional
your employees.
PPE.
That's right. At Tyvek suits or
Yeah.
That's what Tom and I were talking about before it started from an acclimation standpoint, right? You got a whole bunch of people descending on an area to help, and you were talking about folks that came from all over the country.
People
to help.
rolling down from Canada into Houston.
Great
I mean,
point.
they're not used to.
Great point.
I'm a Northeasterner by birth and everything, and it took a toll on me down there dealing with like 100-degree days and relative humidities up in the 90s.
Yeah.
And FR clothing. I mean, it literally took me the first couple of weeks on the job site. I had to take obviously a lot more frequent breaks and everything, drinking feverishly just to keep myself hydrated.
Yeah.
But there was an acclimation process.
Sure.
Because my body just wasn't. And again, we had some tremendous safety staff and everything that if you tried to push yourself or whatever, they would be like right there. Like, look, no shame in the game. It's better that you're upright and working slow and making progress than you being down and shutting this location down while we,
That's right.
they were fantastic with, keeping us, from doing things foolish. I mean, they were kind of our sanity checks coming around, and it's like, look, you guys are pushing hard and everything, and you're making progress, but I'm going to insist that you all go to the cooler right now, grab some Gatorades, hydrate, and then come on back over. So again, it's all that communication and watching out for one another.
Sure.
Checking your buddies and stuff like that, looking at the expressions on their face, the paleness of their skin, and doing the right thing and having them stand down. But dealing with fatigue, I mean, long hours, climate conditions, and in some cases, I mean, you are working harder than in your standard outage because again, you got these extra facets that you're dealing with before you can just get to your normal realm of work.
Yeah, and the mental health aspect too, right? I think one of you mentioned that just the fact that during these long turnarounds, outages, shutdowns, they really start to wear on people. And I remember our old boss, he would say, not that you're old, Larry, but he would say that a turnaround can bring out the best in everyone, or the worst,
or the worst.
And you got to just keep that in mind. And I think you do that by knowing your people, right, and the peer checks and that constant communication, and really just again that culture of care approach, and your safety resources are there as advocates. They're out there helping just to be that extra resource, and so just hearing you mention that made me remember. But it was very true. People that you could work with on other projects and other initiatives. They might be having a really bad day. Right? Maybe they've not had power or water to their house for going on 3 weeks now.
Oh, exactly.
Or they're struggling with finding a hotel to put their family up because they can't put their dogs in a kennel. I mean, that stuff will wear on you.
That was one of the real world issues that we face, and I think because a lot of the contractors and we all came down and any available apartments we took out, apartment leases. A lot of us came down with fifth wheels and stuff like that. So we occupied all the campsites and all the hotels. But you forget about the staff. That's at that facility. They're dealing with the problem during the day, and many times their stress is not going away because now they're going home and dealing with trying to put their personal life back into order as well.
Exactly.
So your point extremely well taken, the human aspect, and making sure that through the fatigue, through all of the organized chaos that you're going through, that you keep your personality in check, and you just try to show that empathy and look, we're all frustrated, count to 10, walk away, cooler heads always prevail. And I think that again was one of the big lessons and things that we tried to really consciously manage every day. Even at one point, I remember one of the safety guys, really great sense of humor, missed his calling in life, could have been a stand-up comic, but sometimes just in the mornings, after the initial safety meeting in the morning, you just do a little stand-up comedy and everything, just to kind of lighten the spirit and get people relaxed. And, it just put you in a different frame when you walked, away. It's like, oh, okay, I was, having a bit of a stressful morning, just waiting in the line to get through the gate this morning just seemed more difficult than other times. I slipped on that gravel, spilled my coffee. Oh my God, the day was, and I really applaud the safety guys that were on the job site. They stayed conscious of that. I think when they went from work crew to work crew, I think that was one of their observations, was just, monitoring the overall tone and stepping in and making adjustments if they need to. And then, like I said, sometimes the adjustments was 5 minutes later, they show up with a cooler of fresh Gatorade, nicely chilled, and that nice little extra, or pull us together and say, you know what, guys, are you at a point where you can break? I think we all just need to break. And then they'll like tell jokes or a story or whatever. But managing the people and keeping calm, professional, staying to our disciplines of safety protocols. Those were, great deal of respect for the individuals that were able to manage that. That was difficult, but they did a great job.
Tom just gave our friends some new ideas, huh?
That's right. That's right. Well, I do think that, in industry, we're doing a better job thinking about the mental health aspects of our workforce, right? I mean, we're all human. We've been, I think, in recent years, really diving more into human performance or human and organizational performance as we think about preventing significant incidents. And I think also just remembering to factor in just the mental health side is the right balanced approach just for, setting up and keeping your teams happy and healthy and successful. And that.
Well, and I know one of the things that, we always teach in our safety training classes is, after you have been provided the training, after, you have been given the procedures and everything to ensure your safety, really comes down to, it is your actions from that point forward, or lack thereof, that's going to dictate, your safety on that job site. So all the help that we can get just to kind of, keep our own mental health and our discipline and our awarenesses, because, outages can be organized chaos in themselves. You got a lot to do, a short time to do it in, but you don't have all of these extra facets going on. But that is probably what I found to be one of the biggest things of discipline. Because again, I go back to, working several of the Shermco outages and stuff. We would mobilize, have tremendous amount of workers there. And, Clayton finishes up his job tasks early because, he's just, fast and efficient, much better than the rest of us. But the way Clayton moves around that plant is very important. He can't just leave his crew just because he's done. We don't want him going around socializing, because now he could be a distraction to other people at critical moments. And if an emergency would come, his crew leader doesn't know where he's at now. So we talk about this in some of our safety trainings and everything, that, even the way you move around a job site, if you finished up early, you really should go to your crew leader. Hey, I'm finished up. Do you have anything else that I can contribute? No, we're good here. But hey, let me go ahead and call the project lead. Hey, Clayton's wrapping up. He's done with my crew. Is there any place that you want him to go and lend a hand? Oh, head on over to building 66, report to Jeremy. Jeremy can definitely use some of your assistance. The key element there is, again, we brought it up so many times, communication. Crew leader 1 now knows that he signs off of the JHA or AHA, whatever term you want to use. He's no longer my responsibility. Jeremy, he's going to, as soon as he gets to you, you're going to review the JHA with him. He's going to sign on. Now he's part of your crew and your responsibility. We track the movement of the people. nobody's becoming a distraction or possibly getting into areas of the plant that they shouldn't be getting into. But even simple things like that, whether it's just a standard outage or magnify tenfold when you're doing a disaster recovery, it's those simple things that make huge differences.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that brings us right about 5 minutes to the top of the hour. Matt, you've been, oddly quiet.
I've just been letting you guys go, man. This is good stuff. I mean, it seems like when I'm just listening to it kind of as an outsider, because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a field service tech, I'm a marketing guy. Like, it seems common sense, but then you're saying, most of the accidents are electrical, and it's not like these guys are started yesterday. So some of these accidents that happen are from guys who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they have that momentary slip that they just forget. And that's all it takes, right? To lose a hand, to lose a life. And so it's important we keep talking about this stuff to keep it at the forefront of everybody's minds, because there just seems like there's so much at once, right? Like we talked about before, we got, there's a war going on that's affecting everything in the world. There's big hurricane. We're still battling COVID on and off. There's so many things at once. It's like you just get brain fatigue because everybody's so concerned about everything, and it takes that one split second to forget, right? You know what? I looked down just a second and I ran the stop sign, right, and hit somebody and killed 3 people. So it's the same thing in this industry. It only takes a lapse, and it's very dangerous. So that's it. If anybody has any questions while we're wrapping up here, go ahead and put in your comments. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, feel free to chat in here for the last few minutes, and we'll answer any questions you have. If you're working on something right now, you need any advice from these guys, or you just want to make a comment about what we've talked about for the last hour, feel free to chime in. Tom, anything you want to plug?
Oh, always, open to the shameless plugs and everything. A couple of the areas that in a couple of weeks I'm going to be going down to the down to the NECA show down in Austin. Cool. And definitely we're going to be talking a lot about our workforce development training aids and membership to different training materials, particularly if you are electrical contractors, either following NICET certifications or NETA certifications. We can definitely help with study guide material, maintaining continuing education credits to maintain your levels. And as we always, in the area of safety, we do once a month sponsor a electrical safety 70E course. So definitely, we still have room in our general enrollments for the month of October. So the normal shameless plugs that I do at the end of, the webinars and the broadcasts.
Hey, Tom, if I may, Matt, just, we talked about doing this on some sort of regular frequency, and actually we came together again a lot sooner than we expected. But, if folks want to share any ideas, or if there's topics, questions, things that, may be on their mind for future episodes, certainly throw that in there as well, right? So
absolutely.
Help us help you, I think is kind of the plug I would put. And then also, I mentioned it on the last one, but Clayton and I will be at Power Test again here early 2023. We'll be there with you guys. And
excellent.
We're going to be doing the part 2 to hazardous energy control and avoiding the pitfalls. And we've got some really great information we're going to share around change management, some of the other tools and processes that lead to a successful initiative. So,
well, definitely the aspects of the change management is one of the items that I'm looking forward to in the presentation and in the paper.
Absolutely.
Because again, these are some of the biggest challenges that organizations face.
For sure. Yeah.
What was the one saying that somebody coined several years ago? The only constant in modern life is change. Yeah.
That's right.
So and I know you guys are leaders in the concepts and execution of change management. So really looking forward to the power test. I just was recently told that I've got a 45-minute paper on the front end days. I have a seminar at the back end days.
Oh, wow.
And I just got accepted onto a cable panel.
Awesome.
So I'll also be one of the discussion group.
Well, good deal.
Looking forward to it. Hey, maybe we can broadcast a live power hour from Power Test this year.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
we'll
have the Shermco boys there. So
I like it. Cool.
Yeah, not the 3-hour marathon we did last year, but I think maybe we'll do a couple. Maybe we'll do like an hour broadcast each day. I think so. We're gonna change that up a little bit too. That'd be fun to do one live from Orlando with hurricane free in Orlando in March. So
hurricane free, right?
Yes.
yeah. So the only thing I want to plug, Tom, real quick. Obviously, everybody knows we do our monthly webinars on the third Thursday. This one's coming up October 20th. If you haven't registered for it, go to protechequip.com webinars. This month we're doing testing for partial discharge, exploring online techniques, and that's going to be 1 p.m. Thursday, October 20th, 1 p.m. Central Time. So we have already got a lot of registrations for that. We've been having like 100 plus on consistently from like a dozen countries. So it's not limited just to the United States. We have guys from like Saudi Arabia and Australia staying up in the middle of the night to watch our webinars. So if you are NETA certified, you get 2 NETA CTDs. There's no charge for our webinars. As always, you can hop on, get yourself 2 NETA CTDs. You need to watch it live to get those 2 CTDs, not on the replay. So go ahead and go to protechequip.com webinars to register for that. With that, guys, I have nothing more to say. Oh, I do have one more to say. Got your Shermco hat on today, and you guys have our Protec tumblers there. Please take your tumblers with you and enjoy your water or other choice of adult beverage if you like.
Yeah.
So as always, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us live in studio this time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we will see you on our next Protec Live. And if you have any questions in the meantime, just post in the comments below and we will try to answer them for you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.